In a shocking twist at Beyond the Gates, Tyrell never thought his anger would reach such extremes. Over the years, he had learned to live without knowing his origins. He chose Martin and Smitty as his family, his safe haven, the people who had accompanied him through his growth, through his teenage crises, through his attempts to escape this hurtful world. They were the people who had held his life together through love and responsibility, not blood. And then, in an instant, all of that was dragged down to the abyss by a name, Bill Hamilton. Not an unfamiliar name. On the contrary, it was a powerful, familiar, influential man who had given Tyrell valuable life advice, who had advised Martin on many major political decisions. And now, that man was his biological father. A damning truth he had no choice but to face. His anger at June wasn't just that she'd kept it from him. It was that she'd deliberately chosen to let him grow up in the dark, living with unanswered questions, building an identity without roots. Tyrell felt manipulated, as if his whole life were a play he wasn't allowed to know the script for. Samantha was different. She'd always yearned to find her roots, always longed to hear June say sorry, to hug her mother like a child again, as if time could be turned back and all the lost years could be healed with one honest word. The encounter with June had been a door ajar, but now it had burst open, bringing with it a storm of memories and shocking truths. Bill was her real father, the man she'd once met at a community festival, the man she'd felt a strange, inexplicable sense of familiarity. Now, all the messy pieces suddenly came together in a cruelly complete picture. Samantha didn't know whether to be happy or to cry. She felt something in her heart both filled and shattered. The hope of a real family seemed to be coming back to life, but it was also a knife cutting into her trust in Martin and Smitty, the people who had sheltered her since she was in diapers. June was slowly crumbling. She had kept the secret for too long, and when she finally let go of the past, she also knew that no excuse could erase the feeling of betrayal that her two children felt. She had thought that keeping silent was to protect them, to prevent a complicated world from swallowing their fragile childhood. But now, she realized that was just an excuse. It was the fear of a mother who had been wrong, who had been abandoned, who had been too weak to face the man who had changed her life. Bill Hamilton never knew she had children. He lived in the spotlight, making decisions for the community, orchestrating elections, and all the while leaving a void in the lives of children he didn't know he had created. June now put it all in the hands of Samantha, a daughter she hoped still had enough compassion to understand that no one could turn back time. But that didn't mean it was too late to do it right. The question now was no longer who their father was, but what they would do with the truth. Samantha tossed and turned at night, afraid to look Martin in the eyes for fear the sincerity in his gaze would melt her, make her unable to speak. She didn't want to betray the people who raised her, but she couldn't continue living with half her mind fragmented. She considered writing a letter, or even just a recording, to confess to Martin and Smitty everything. But she was afraid. Afraid they would think she was calculating, hiding, taking advantage of trust. Afraid of the look of disappointment. Afraid of Tyrell's gaze, which was sinking deeper and deeper into anger and coldness. Tyrell, on the other hand, chose silence as a form of punishment. He said nothing to Martin, nor gave Smitty any sign. But the change in his demeanor, the missed dinners, the bitter look in his eyes when looking at family photos, all were silent accusations. He began to avoid intimate conversations, gradually becoming distant, even cruel in his words. For him, the truth was a burden that could not be shared, a pain that could not be healed. He did not want to forgive June, but he could not forgive himself if he continued to pretend that everything was okay. There were nights when he stood in front of Bill's door, not knowing whether to knock or run. He imagined all the scenarios. Bill would refuse, deny, be angry. But what he feared most was that Bill would open his arms to him, because that would force him to open up, to accept that something very important had been missing all his life. Samantha, confused, began to understand Bill. Not to replace him, but to understand herself. She began to collect speeches, videotapes, trying to piece together the person she was becoming with the man who had unwittingly left his mark on her. She saw herself as he, in his logic, in his angry voice, in his idealistic gaze. But at the same time, she saw herself as a product of Martin and Smitty, a product of years of unconditional love. She was torn. One side was origin, the other was home. There was no choice without pain. This story was no longer simply a secret revealed. It was the unraveling of a family, the cracks in trust that widened with each beat of memory. Problem with no right answer, only consequences. Tyrell and Samantha were now more than children looking for their parents. They are two souls thrown into a maelstrom of identity, betrayal, and irreversible decisions. And while June struggles with guilt, Bill lives in a world completely unaware that the two beings he shares his life are struggling every day to understand whether to be in his life or to disappear forever as if they never existed. Each of them stands on the threshold of a truth where love, anger, and loyalty are so intertwined that neither knows what is right. And perhaps that is the greatest tragedy of all. The truth that is revealed is not simply a personal crisis between a mother and her two children, but a political bomb waiting to explode in the heart of Fairmont Crest, where power, money, and lineage are the three unshakable pillars. June's revelation that Bill Hamilton is Tyrell and Samantha's biological father not only shatters the emotional foundations of her two children, but also throws their entire upper-class world into inevitable turmoil. For Bill is not only an influential figure in business and politics, but also one of the key individuals maintaining the balance of power at Fairmont Crest. He is the one who alliances depend on, the bridge between generations of families, the revered figure in community forums. A crack in that image would not only shake his position, but also topple the pillars that support the fragile balance of this land. Bill's reaction will be the key to this chain of falling dominoes. If he chose to deny the truth, to deny his biological connection to Tyrell and Samantha, it would not only hurt the two children, but he would also face public suspicion, with a June who could break the silence and cause a stir in the town. But if he chose to accept, if Bill publicly declared Tyrell and Samantha to be his biological children, then his entire legacy, his fortune, and his family structure would be thrown into immediate conflict. It was unclear how Haley, his acknowledged daughter, would react to learning she had two half-siblings, descended from a relationship buried decades ago. Haley was not someone who could be swayed. She protected the family name as part of her identity. The existence of Tyrell and Samantha is a direct threat to her inheritance, to her position in the trusts, the company shares, and the social alliances she is building for the upcoming election campaign. Martin will not be left out of this. For Martin, raising Tyrell and Samantha is not just a responsibility, but a journey of a true father. He has bonded with them with unconditional love, and now witnessing the truth that could strip away all the values he has cultivated would be a fatal blow. Martin is not only a surrogate father, but also a man with increasingly clear political ambitions. The emergence of Bill as his biological father not only threatens his feelings, but also affects his political standing in the community, especially when rumors surrounding his true relationship with June could be twisted into sordid stories. If Bill were to be considered the biological father of the two children, would all of Martin's contributions be negated? Would he face the loss of custody of his role, of the respect he had earned over the years? Bill's acceptance may have been a humanitarian act, but it was a grenade in the heart of Fairmont Crest's highly regulated social system. Other families, those tied to Bill through economic alliances, political contracts, and intermarriage commitments, might see his recognition of illegitimate children as a weakness, a threat to stability. Whispers would spread that Bill was no longer in control of the family, that he was leading a double life, that such a man was unfit to lead community initiatives or represent Fairmont Crest in zoning changes. Community opportunists would seize the opportunity to push him out of leadership positions, force him to resign from prestigious boards, even push for an investigation into whether he had used his influence to protect June or manipulated his personal records. Samantha could feel the turmoil building in the eyes of those around her. She was no longer welcome at afternoon teas, no longer received compliments at charity functions. The gazes of the community ladies had shifted from affectionate to critical, from friendly to judgmental. But what hurt her most was that Tyrell, too, was beginning to lean toward absolute silence. He stopped arguing, stopped prying. He seemed to be choosing to erase all emotion to protect himself. Samantha couldn't do that. She needed answers, needed emotion, needed recognition. She couldn't bear to feel like an outsider, an intruder in a pre-established order. Meanwhile, Haley began organizing everything as if preparing for a legal battle. She met with lawyers, reviewed wills, checked inheritance clauses, and made a list of legal moves to ensure that Tyrell and Samantha, whether recognized or not, would not get a penny of Bill's fortune. Haley saw this as a battle not just for rights, but for honor, for the image of the Hamilton family, which she was the only one left standing. In Haley's mind, Samantha and Tyrell are the stain, the living proof of betrayal, and she's willing to do anything to protect what she believes is hers. Bill is at the center of that whirlwind, and he knows there's no way back. He spends long nights in his office looking back at every milestone in his life, every relationship, every mistake. He's not sure he has the courage to step up in public and say, "They're my children," but he can't ignore Samantha's pained, pleading eyes or Tyrell's angry silence. He knows that if he doesn't do something, he'll lose everything. Not just his children, but the rest of himself, the humanity that power has obscured. The question is no longer will he admit it, but will he have the courage to take responsibility for all that the truth brings? Because in a world where the truth is not welcome, the first to get hurt is always the one who dares to say the right thing. And sometimes, the price of the truth is not freedom, but eternal loneliness. It doesn't take long for Haley to strike back. While Bill tries to reconcile things with tense and meaningless family meetings, she begins to implement a sinister plan to protect the Hamilton dynasty in her own way. She holds secret meetings with members of the Community Foundation's board of directors, leaking information that Tyrell had a violent criminal record as a teenager, even though the truth has long been resolved and his record has been cleared. Martin cannot stand aside when he sees Tyrell and Samantha being smeared. He is a mild-mannered man, but when he sees the children he raised being attacked with despicable tactics, he becomes unexpectedly sharp and cold. Martin uses his existing media and political connections to fight back. Martin cannot stay out of the fight when he sees Tyrell and Samantha being smeared. He is a gentle person, but when he sees the children he raised being attacked with low-class tricks, he becomes unexpectedly sharp and cold. Martin uses his existing media and political connections to fight back. Who will win and be hurt in the end? Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. All the content I make is just speculation and personal sharing. If you find the video interesting and useful, please support me with a like and leave a comment. If you have better ideas or more interesting speculations, please share them in the comments section for everyone to discuss. I appreciate all your contributions and support. Sincerely, thank you.